Nobody uses centralized police system. In a multicultural country, no one uses centralized military, centralized court system, and everything is centralized. Even election is conducted by the centralized government. So because of this, the best of Yoruba brain are scattered all over the world, and majority of us have been killed when we put guns in the hand of our enemies, the Igbo and the Hausa Fulani. It is in view of this that I will speak on the interview of Ike Ekerimandu. He is the Deputy Senate President of Nigeria, and then he deputizes for Bukola Saraki Fulani, who is the Senate President. So we do this because one of the things we do as I have is that we monitor every statement of Igbo leaders and then Hausa Fulani leaders, so that we can use this to reorientate the Yoruba nation, so that they can know the game plans our enemies are having for us. So it is based on this that I will discuss his interview, which he granted yesterday. And then when someone in that office, someone in that position speaks, we need to try and understand what they say. We need to be able to look into their mind. And then that is what we're going to do today. So when he speaks as the Deputy Senate President, one, being Igbo, he speaks to the desire of the Igbo nation. That's very fundamental. And then as a Deputy Senate President, he speaks the mind of the leadership of the Senate, and by extension, the thinking of the Hausa Fulani. That is the thinking of the Hausa Fulani. And in line of that, I'm going to sharpen your insight into certain things that he has said. Virtually everything he said in an interview to the premium newspaper, I believe, yesterday. Now, he says Fulani, which people we have always erroneously called them Northerners. It is actually Fulani that we are referring to. He says Fulani fear that if the country gets restructured along the regional system, the oil revenue generated from the south will no longer get to them. That is the statement made by Ike Ekerimandu, the Deputy Senate President of Nigeria. He says that the Fulani, he actually used the word Northerners. Is referring to the Fulani. Said Northerners fear that if the country gets restructured along the regional system, the oil revenue generated from the south will no longer get to them. So there's a fundamental error there. The oil revenue is not generated from the south. And I want you to be guided by the fact that Ike Ekerimandu is an Igbo man. So whatever he says, even though he might be pretending to be speaking against the Hausa Fulani, he has actually portrayed the desire and the interest of the Igbo. He said the whole revenue generated from the south will no longer get to them. That is the fear of the Fulani if we have a structured Nigeria. So let me address that. And I'm going to address a couple of other things he said. First, there is no oil revenue coming from the south. We have to disabuse our mind from that statement. It's false. It is fraudulent. It is untrue. There is no oil money coming from the south. Oil money in Nigeria is coming from Yoruba land and the people we address as South-South. South-South people. So there is no oil money coming from the south as a block. 20% of the oil revenue comes from Yoruba land. 20% of oil revenue comes from Yoruba land. The remaining 80% is coming from the South-South geopolitical zone. And when we talk about South-South geopolitical zone, we're not talking about one nation. We're talking about multitude of nations. We're talking about Edo nation, Urobo nation, Ogoni nation, Ijaw nation, Efik Ibibio. Some will want to call Isoko, Ukwani, and others. We have about 10 distinct nations that made up the geographical space we call South-South. So collectively, these 10 nations within South-South produce 80% of the revenue from oil. The Yoruba nation, as one people, we produce 20%. So by the time you factor in and you break down the 80% that is coming from South-South, the Ijaw nation of the South-South produces 16%, 16% of the oil revenue in Nigeria. The Yoruba nation contributed the highest revenue to oil. There is no kobo that is coming from Igbo land as part of oil revenue. So the statement made by Ike Ekerimandu that the Northerners fear that if the country gets restructured along the regional system, the oil revenue generated from the South will no longer get to them. There is no oil revenue generated from the South. It is only the Yoruba nation and the South-South region who are generating the oil revenue in Nigeria. There is no oil revenue coming from Igbo land. We must speak the truth at all times. If there is any oil revenue coming from Igbo land, Nnamdi Kanu and his IPOP members will have been blowing up pipelines in Igbo land. So there's no oil money coming from Igbo land. There is no oil money coming from the Middle Belt. Not a dime in what people call oil money is coming from the Middle Belt. Not a kobo of this oil revenue is coming from the Kanuri land that we call Northeast region. Not a sisi is coming from the Hausa Fulani region that we call Northwest region. So this has to be explained to Ike Ekerimandu. He cannot be bullshitting the entire nation by saying that one oil revenue is coming from the South. Is a deputy Senate president. If he cannot speak the truth, he must not be in that position. Unfortunately, he's Igbo. You don't expect them to speak the truth. So I want the young Yoruba to know this. Whoever has wealth dominates and control those who do not. So 20% of the oil revenue is coming from Yoruba land. 16% is coming from Ijaw land. So we, the Yoruba, we are the highest contributor of the foreign exchange earning in Nigeria. The only source of foreign exchange earning for Nigeria is the sales of crude oil. Because we sell this crude oil abroad, they do not pay us in Naira. Naira is only the currency in Nigeria. They don't even recognize Naira in Benin Republic. How much more you use it to trade? The world currency for trading is dollar. So when we sell crude oil and we get dollars, the money is kept in our reserve, foreign exchange reserve. That money that is there, the Yoruba is the highest contributor to that money. So in Ekerimandu, there is nothing like oil money coming from the South. The oil money is actually coming from Yoruba land, and then coming from the Ijaw land, coming from Efik Ibibio land, coming from Ogoni land, coming from Edo land, coming from Urobo land, and the rest of them in the South-South. So young Yoruba, you must have this fact that it is the Yoruba nation that is responsible for the oil revenue and the foreign exchange earning from oil. That money belongs to us. But are we the one managing that wealth? No. Are we the one in charge of that wealth? No. Is the wealth benefiting the Yoruba nation? No. It is benefiting the Hausa Fulani. So Hausa Fulani contributed nothing to the oil revenue, and they can no longer control it, regardless of whether they fear that the oil revenue will not get to them after the return to regional government. It is none of our business. What Ekerimandu is not speaking against is that the oil revenue in Nigeria belongs to the Yoruba nation. and it is the people who have something who must predominate over it. He says that the Fulani fear that if the country gets restructured along regional system, the oil revenue generated from the south will no longer get to them. But what is the Fulani doing? The oil revenue belongs to the Yoruba nation, but foreigners are controlling what belongs to us, the Yoruba nation. But Ike, the Kirimandu, being an Igbo man, is not bothered about that. He's not concerned about that. I give example. I have a glass of water here. It is mine. So I represent the Yoruba nation. This glass of water belongs to the Yoruba nation. But to drink it, we have to take instruction from the Fulani because they are in control of the presidency. They control the military. They control the police. They control the gun. So they put the gun to our head and they tell us when to drink our own water. The Kirimandu is not perturbed about that, but he wants the Fulani to continue to control that oil wealth. But I can tell you one thing. The Yoruba nation would rather give America 10% of that oil wealth than for Fulani to continue to control it with the backing of the self-serving career politicians in England.